Okay, so I put this gun back together. This is the gun that we showed that a customer sent to us. This is going to be a project gun. Really nice Remington 700. We're going to do everything to this. But I put it all back together so when we start that video, it'll be just like starting with a gun that you bought at the store. So there's that. I like that stock, by the way. Nice stock.
It's very pretty.
Okay, then this. So Vicky's holding the GoPro again, right in her hand right now. But somebody said, hey, you realize these tops come off. These tops come off and you have a tripod adapter that goes on there. We own these. We're going to use this. This actually might work pretty good for that heavy camera because, I mean, you can rotate it. I mean, it's not going to be like a professional camera tripod, but I mean, we had this, and I might not have even thought to use it. So somebody in the comments said, hey, use one of these. So we're going to try it. Let's see, what else? Something happened here. Oh, yeah, that was the impetus for this entire video. So we're taking barrels out of tubes and writing down serial numbers and things. Every barrel has a serial number on it. And suddenly something jumped out at us. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 7 barrels here. They are all 6mm. They are all 1 1/8. They are 3 different contours. They're all Bartlein. But when we were writing down the serial numbers, one is Q.M.M 59737, 9736, 9735, 9734, 9733, 9732, 9731. And these are for, I think, 3 different cartridges also. So I don't think we've ever had 7 barrels sequentially serial numbered that are different contours. I mean, it was just like, holy cow, these are all. So we wanted to show you that. Now, what that must mean is, obviously, Bartlein starts with a bigger blank, bigger in diameter. They must have, I would assume, rifled all these and then profiled them all, contoured them, or vice versa. Maybe they contoured them first and then rifled them. I do not know, but obviously these came out of the exact same batch and lot number of steel. So it'd be very interesting to see, like I said, this is at least 3 different guns here for these 7 barrels. It'll be interesting to see how they shoot. That if one shoots awesome, they all shoot awesome. Or if one shoots average, they all shoot average. I don't know. I just thought it was interesting. Now, here's a dilemma. You know, we run everything pretty dang tight, right? We don't build a lot of slop. Most of our reamers would definitely be considered minimum spec match grade reamers. They are not semi-spec reamers. And so I have 2 6-dashers that I have to build, right? 2 6-dashers, and both of the customers are saying they want to use this alpha brass, right? Okay. So I have a 6-dasher reamer right here that is essentially still brand new, that was bought in 4/19/2017. Now here's the dilemma. See all this brass? That's a lot of brass. There's 250 pieces of brass right here. This is Norma. And if you will recall, way back in 2017, Grizzly, the same people that make that lathe, Grizzly requested that Norma make a large number of formed head stamp 6-dasher brass. And if that doesn't mean anything to you, it should, because you realize people were running dashers for years and years and years, but they were wildcats. They were not head stamped 6.6. They were not head stamped 6mm dasher. Okay? So the guy that runs Grizzly, Shiraz, I believe is his first name, he had Norma make, and don't quote me on this because I can't remember, this is a long time, but I think he had to make like 100,000 or maybe 1,000,000 pieces of this brass formed head stamp 6-dasher. But as far as I know at the time, it was still not a SAMI or CIP cartridge, okay? So it was still a Wildcat. But these are the dimensions they came up with, and he had to make a lot of these, okay? Now, again, I don't know how much it was. Maybe it was more than 1,000,000. Maybe it was 10,000,000. It was a lot of pieces of brass. I do remember that. Well, I got a bunch of it, and I sent my dummy rounds. These are the actual dummy rounds that Dave Manson made the reamer off of. These are 105 VLDs, Berger VLDs, and I send it like this. Dummy rounds, pieces of brass, average pieces of brass, average bullets, and then Dave made me a reamer. Okay, so here's the reamer print that Dave made me all those years ago, right? The issue, and it's always an issue with brass, is that even from lot number to lot number, there's going to be some variation, hopefully a very small amount. But it's possible, depending on the cartridge, that if you had everything set up to the minimum size piece of brass, that the maximum size piece of brass might not chamber. That's always a possibility. But usually, with really high quality brass, the tolerances are fairly close. My dilemma here and now is, I got all this normal brass, which the guys don't want to use, and I got a reamer that is set up for the Norma brass. But I have 2 different lot numbers of alpha brass. And of course, I did exactly what you would think that you would do. I took a whole bunch of these Normas and I started measuring everything. And I didn't just measure it with the caliber. I had the mic out here also. And I started measuring all the dimensions, because a reamer tells you, here, a reamer print, show them the print. The reamer print gives you a lot of information, okay? So it's showing you a lot of things. I'm not going to go into all that. I don't have time right now. But I measured a whole bunch of the Norma brass to see how it compared to the print. And typical with Dave Manson reamers, built by Dave Manson, very close, nearly identical. Well, that's real good if you were going to be working out of these 250 pieces of Norma brass. The problem is, and a potential problem is, these guys want to use the alpha brass. So, got to make sure I don't get anything mixed up. So I got 2 different lot numbers here. So I did the exact same thing. I started measuring all of the critical dimensions, you know, case length, at the base, at the shoulder. I mean, I started measuring everything, and they're not identical. They're not identical. Now they're very close, and really that's the problem. If this alpha brass, say in the shoulder, say it had been something like 4 thousandths bigger than the Norma brass, it would be real simple. I got to get a new reamer. Okay, the problem is they're pretty dang close, but they're not identical. So it puts me in really a hard spot here, because I'd like to just use that reamer and get started on this guy's big bench gun, his 1,000-yard bench gun. The problem is, is it one of, I don't know, is it one of these barrels? I don't think it is one of these barrels. Yeah, it is. Yeah. It's one of these barrels right here. Yeah. So this is like a, here, let me see that. Isn't this like, I mean, this is a big barrel.
It's a very big barrel.
Isn't this like a $600 barrel?
500 to 600, yeah.
Yes, I mean, it's a very expensive barrel. So it's not like I can just be like, oh, let's just try it and find out. You know, not with a $600 barrel and then be like, oh, it didn't work. And so now you got to use the Norma brass, which I don't think he'd be real happy with that. So I can only measure so close with calipers and micrometers here, okay? And I don't have fixtures. I don't have any way of holding it. At Vicky's work, They have an optical comparator, and she has very, very advanced measuring tools. With permission, if her boss said that it was okay, she could take all this down there and spend a couple hours measuring the crap out of everything to see if we think they're interchangeable, compatible. Or I could take this reamer and all the original dummy stuff, all the original brass, and then make up some more dummies out of this brass and send it all to Ray Gross at Manson Reamers, and with a simple question, Ray, will this work? And then if the answer is yes, it'll work, he could return it all, and I'm sure they have to charge us something because it's going to take time to do that. Or the answer would be, no, it's not going to work, you need a new reamer. Well, you need a new reamer means at least probably 8 to 10 to 12 weeks. All right, that puts us way into, it doesn't matter, puts us months down the road. I don't want to do that. So, my alternative, which I think will be a wise decision, is I just so happen I have 2 pieces of barrel stub here. This is a Brux that I had made a 6XC out of. And this is I believe this is a Bartlein, and I can't tell, I made something out of a 6mm something. So I got these 2 pieces of barrel stub. I think what I'm going to do as soon as we clean this giant mess up here is I think I'm going to put one or the other in the lathe, and I am going to actually chamber this stub. I will chamber it just like as if I was chambering the gun with the reamer that I have here. And then when that chamber is complete, and by the way, as I'm coming up on it, like say when I get down to the last 20 thou, 15 thou, 10 thou to go, I'm going to start taking pieces of this Norma brass and pieces of both lots of the alpha brass, and I'll start to see how they fit, right? Because normally I chamber not to a headspace gauge, unless the headspace gauge is identically matched to that brass. Normally I chamber to the brass that's going to be used in the gun. And so if I sneak up on it slow and I start interchanging the brass, I should be able to tell whether they're going to be interchangeable or not. I'll definitely be able to feel it radially. And then, depending on how far they go in other words, where the shoulder of the brass hits the shoulder of the chamber, you realize I'll be able to, since I'm not going to use a receiver, I think. I'll come back to that in a second. If I'm not going to use a receiver, what you'll be measuring is how much of the case head is protruding from the face of what will be the stub gauge. So, unfortunately, that's going to take a heck of a lot of time and a lot of work. The upside will be, if the guy wants it, he'll have a really cool stub gauge. I have made those stub gauges before, and they are really neat because you can physically hold it in your hand and see exactly what's going on. The other issue with this, and this is a problem, is I almost want to actually chamber it just like you would do, not a stub gauge. In other words, actually chamber it onto the receiver, because then I could really see how it feels, how you interchange the brass. The issue is, though, this is a BAT MST, which is 1.400 in diameter. The biggest stub here I have is 1255. Now I could do it, and indeed I might do it, but I haven't decided that part yet, because you're literally talking days worth of work. So I don't know, but if you guys don't know, a BAT MST has a cone bolt nose. Therefore, it has to have a cone breech. In other words, a funnel in a funnel, right? And that helps them feed better because there's no sharp edge going into the chamber. I have not done a cone nose bolt for a long time. We use so many HRs and VRs, and they are flat nose, if you don't know that it's like a Remington 700, but not recessed. That I haven't done a cone nose bolt in a long time. So if you wonder why it takes me so long to do guns, this is why. Because I want to get it right, and I might even practice. In other words, I might make an entire I might chamber an entire stub gauge, actually chamber it and thread it and do everything and practice on my dimensions on the cone bolt nose just to get the freaking thing right, okay? It would be so much easier if I could just package all this up and just say, make me a new reamer, and it came in 3 weeks. If I could do that, I'd just be like, make me a reamer. They're way, way behind. Everybody is way behind. I don't know where all these barrels and reamers and I don't know where all this stuff is going or who all is using this. It's really weird. The actual gun industry, as far as ammo sales and gun sales, is way down right now, like way down. Okay, but you can't get any of the stuff you need. You can't get powder, you can't get bullets, you can't get brass, you can't get anything. So what the heck is really going on? I have no idea. I think that's it for right now. This is just going to be a short video. I've got to get this figured out. This is going to be a really cool gun. It's that 6-inch wide forearm on a heavy bench gun. So I think that's it. We'll see you later. All right, since I saw you about 3 hours ago, I went full OCD, okay? And it's actually pretty cool. I'm glad I did it. It's just so much work. So I want you to look at this chart here, because in a minute we're going to go over what I did. So I made a stub gauge, which I'll show you in a second. And so this is the headspace gauge. That is how much it protrudes out of the bottom of the stub gauge, which is a facsimile of the chamber. And so then I cut the necks off of the normal brass, and I numbered them and measured them. And that is just a coincidence. That is not, there was no rhyme to reason to that. So one sticks out, 0148, 0147, 0146. Then we measured the alpha brass, and we did the same thing. We numbered them, and same deal. This is just a coincidence. 0144, 0145, 0146. So you see, you have two of these that are the same. But the trend is, overall, the alpha brass is shorter. Now, I'll show you what I did here. These are actually really cool, and this one came out pretty darn nice. So I took a piece of an old barrel, which I showed you on the other video, like this, and I was going to chamber the whole dang thing. In other words, turn a tenon, thread it, do it all, but this is not large enough in diameter to do what I wanted to do. So it just so happened that I had this piece of Brooks barrel here that was just about perfect in diameter. So here, it's going to be hard. We should be using the other camera, but it's just labor intensive. Okay, so what you got in here is you have a chamber that I made with this reamer right here, with my Manson floating reamer holder. Okay, back on out of there now and come back over here. So here's what we did. And we did this over in the lathe because there's no way I won't be able to get accurate measurements here. So this is the headspace gauge. By the way, you notice it's turned way down. And the reason it's turned way down is this gun has a 0.265 neck in it. That's a tight neck gun. So they turned that down so that this will go in there. Okay, but there is your steel Manson headspace gauge. And then what we did is we measured how far that it protrudes. Hello, Vicki, you have to get that out of my face.
Fine.
Okay, and there it is. All right, and you got to realize the way I'm doing this right here, there's better ways. You could very easily set this on a granite plate, and you could measure, if you had the right tools, you could measure to the top. You understand? So all that matters, it's just a gauge, is what I'm trying to say. It's just a comparative gauge, and it represents the chamber that will be in this gun, assuming we use this reamer, which is what this is all about. So anyways, we stuck that in there like that. We measured how far does it protrude, and we got, on average, 0.149. Okay, now, I had to cut the necks off of all these, but you've got to do a good job of it. In other words, you have to cut that exactly where the neck-shoulder junction meets, because you need all of this shoulder as your headspace datum line. And even that's not correct, but it's kind of correct. So, been a long day. All right, And plus it's hot in here. It's about 90 degrees in here. We're back in the middle of hell season in Lewiston, Idaho. Don't move here. Okay, take this, stick it in there. All right? Now what's really cool is there's multiple things you can learn from this. First of all, this is the Norma brass. You can drop it in there and you can see what it feels like radially. You can feel where it stops. And of course, you can measure it and you see what you get. And that's pretty good. I got 1475 this time. So 0.148. So all we did is we cut the necks off of these all. You can put them in. You can feel them, right? And you can see exactly how uniform they are. These are all numbered, by the way. How uniform they are in relationship to each other, and then in a relationship to an entire different brand and lot number of brass. Okay, so you might notice all of these Norma cases, which the reamer was originally set up for, have a little bit of radial slop. Not much. Okay? And they are, we should point this out, they are very close, their numbers are very close to the headspace gauge. So here there's only 1 thou difference, 2 thou difference, 3 thou difference between that and the gauge. All right, so put that down. Now, these are the alpha cases. And you can see radially, boy, I hope I can get that back out of there without tools. Radially, they are I don't want to mess that up. I got to push that out with something. You'll have to stop just for a second.
Okay.
All right. Actually, I had an Allen wrench really in here. Watch. Okay? Radially, they are larger than the Norma brass. Okay, so here's how I did it. You want to see how much? You can just push that right back out. Okay, within the bolt, you would not even be able to notice that. All right, but here's also something that's interesting. Look at that one. That one goes in easier. So they are not perfectly uniform in diameter. And they are, again, look at the numbers, they are overall shorter. So from there to there, that is 5 thousandths right there, but you've got one that's 46. And so what this does is, it brings up an issue that you have to deal with and decide. The first thing is, can I use the reamer, the Manson reamer that was set up for Norma brass with alpha brass? I would say yes. I would say yes. It fits. It fits snug. I don't think there's going to be any problem. The issue is, obviously though, it is shorter than the Norma brass. And this headspace gauge actually seems, although, like I said, I don't even know if there is SAMI spec for dashers now. This headspace gauge seems to be the best compromise out of all the brass, because if you chambered this gun to that piece of brass, 0.144, do you understand none of these other ones would go? That might go. This would be incredibly tight to close the bolt on. This would be super hard. You probably couldn't even close the bolt. You would have to bump the shoulders back on brand new brass, which we don't want to do. Now, I'm not going to make this decision right at this very moment, but my inclination at this moment, based on these experiments that we did here, is to use the headspace gauge. In other words, give it 0 headspace on this gauge. It's truly 0 on this, since it is the largest thing. Then you would only have 1 here, 2 here, 3 here on this brass. Potentially, on that shortest piece of brass, you could have 5. Now, 5 is way more than whatever that I ever want to work with. But again, this is the stuff nobody else tells you. You have to make some kind of a decision. And tons of guys, I know this for a fact, tons of guys that are chambering guns, they just take the gauge, whatever the gauge is, and that's what they chamber the gun to. And they have no idea where their brass and stuff is. And so, in brass, there can, even in high quality brass, there can be fairly big discrepancies, and almost nobody wants to acknowledge this. In headspace gauges, there can be discrepancies. I bet you I have 50, 60, 70 headspace gauges, and I don't think I have any two that are identical. They're all, some of them are within a half a thou, no doubt. But some of them, some of the belt gauges are like, geez, I've said this before. I thought I had one belt gauge that was like 4, 5, or 6 thou different than the other belt gauges. So anyways, I'm going deep into this. What I wanted to show you was, this put my mind at ease. Because if we would have just measured everything, when it's this tight, when this stuff is this small, I would actually rather see it and feel it. In other words, I can feel exactly how that goes in there. I can tell whether it's too tight or too loose, okay? And I can measure the protrusion. Now, one other thing about this headspace, not headspace gauge, this stub gauge is, I cut it to the length. See, this was an actual 6mm barrel, and this is a cartridge, and that cartridge is going to end up in there, right about there. And so this bullet is going to protrude, and again, about that far, you see? It'll be coming up this way. And so you will also, not only will you be able to check your brass, this won't go in there because the neck's too fat. You'll be able to check your brass against other brass. In other words, you'll be able to check the shoulder to case base relationship on all your new brass. And in fact, you could do it on once fired brass. But once these necks are turned and you have loaded ammo, you will also be able to check the bullet land relationship. In other words, zero jump, a little bit of jump, a lot of jump, or the bullets push back down in, whatever. You'll be able to check where the bullet is in relationship to the rifling, to the lands. Now, here is one thing, because I'm sure somebody who's very astute will pick up on this. This is not the same exact barrel that reamer is going to chamber next. This was a piece of an old Brooks barrel. Barrels have different internal dimensions, especially in 6mm. Some of them are .236, some of them are .237. And then, of course, you've got 4 groove. You have more than this, but what we work with, you have 4 groove, and then you have 5R. So that will change how the bullet engages, at what length and at what point the bullet engages into the rifling. So because this is not taken from the exact barrel that this is going to chamber next, this is very close, but it is not identical. Gosh, that's an awful lot of BS. I mean, this stuff confuses me. But anyways, it came out really, really great. This in all likelihood will go with the gun. Or, if he doesn't want it, I might keep it. Because you think about it, it's a gauge for me. So, when I get another lot number of 6 dasher brass, or say a completely different make, I think Peterson makes it also, I will be able to take this, put it in there, and compare against these numbers, because we're going to keep this on a piece of paper, put it in with the reamer. So it's kind of a cool little thing to have. You can check their work, and you can check your work. I got to go. See ya.